All right, moving on in section 2 of the Music Resource Guide, we're going to talk about other responses to the war, World War II, and also to the Cold War. So Survivor from Warsaw, that was example number 3. That one could be described as expressing the outrage and the horror from the occupation of the Nazis in Warsaw, Poland. Remember how they destroyed a huge amount of the Jewish population in Warsaw. The second one that we talked about is You've Got to Be Carefully Taught. That's the one that talks about the fact that we aren't born with prejudice, but instead we're taught prejudice by our families and our societies. And that song shows the frustration with that fact. Another reaction people had was this idea of wanting to offer comfort or hope for the future and for peace. Various compositions attempted to help people understand those sacrifices made during the war, or to show how much war costs everyone. And the idea of this is to stop future wars from happening. These kind of fall into the grouping of memorial pieces, and the one that our resource guide is focusing on is called War Requiem. It's by Benjamin Britten. He happens to also be British. So this is important to know right here. Britten is a pacifist. A pacifist means that he is against all war and doesn't want to be forced to fight in World War II. This is tricky because at this point, war is seen as patriotic. And if the pacifist is opposed to the war, then they could be misconstrued as being unpatriotic, and other people in his nation worried that he was not loyal to his nation. All of this pressure and stress got to Benjamin Britten, and he decided not to stay in England, and instead he left for the United States in 1939. But first he went to Canada and then into the United States. He's not happy in America. He misses his homeland. So he's got homesickness for England, and eventually he does decide to go back. So now it's 1942, and this is something interesting that you don't necessarily think of in our time. In order for him to go back, he has to face this tribunal, and he has to register as what's called a conscientious objector. So this puts a file out there on him that he is officially not supportive of the war. And that kind of action can have a lot of negative impacts on people's lives. So his tribunal ended up not letting him be a conscientious objector, but he did end up appealing that. And so he didn't have to serve in the war. He was given other work to do, but he still is very, very uncomfortable. He's very uncomfortable in England. And he has this pull between wanting to be in his homeland and wanting to be away because he's so uncomfortable. During all of this challenge for Benjamin Britten, the town of Coventry, England, is in the process of getting ready to build a new cathedral. This is to replace a cathedral that was bombed by the Nazis. So that one was St. Michael's Cathedral. This one is currently in ruins. It's been destroyed. And so the citizens of Coventry decide that they want to create a new cathedral, and they want to have a big musical composition to be played to honor the building of that. Benjamin Britten sees this. This is important. Important as focusing on the need to end war in general and how important it is to move toward reconciliation. This reconciliation figures heavily in what he makes as choices. We see down here on page 67, he has some really specific requests for the soloists in his War Requiem. So I want you to highlight this part. To enhance the message of reconciliation, Britten had made some symbolic choices when selecting his solo singers for the war requiem. One should be English, one should be German, and one should be Russian. So it's 1962. You can see how this would be problematic, but Britten is certain that this is what he wants. This picture up here, Galina Vishnevskaya, she is one of the people who he selects to be a soloist. She would be the soprano, and then Peter Pears would be the English person as a tenor. Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau is the baritone and the German. So Galina Vishnevskaya, she is the Russian soprano that he has chosen. So these are difficult times for musicians to have the freedom to do what they want. In fact, Vishnevskaya, she is criticized by her government, and they're critical because they say, how can she want to stand next to a German and an Englishman and be so political? And so she has a hard time even getting her government to allow her to participate in this. She does end up getting that permission. They let her sing in it, but all of this was challenging and difficult for the producers to get to pull off. Even though all of this was challenging, when it was actually performed, people adored it. It was beautiful. The form that it takes is called a requiem. And what that means is it's an ancient Catholic funeral rite for the dead. This builds on chants. If you remember when I've talked about melody and harmony, chants are all done with one melody. Let's see, what else? If we go down, you can look and see, in addition to the music, Benjamin Britten had some poets or some poetry put in here as well. And one of the poets, this his last name is Owen, he doesn't write what people want to hear, so to speak. Instead, he calls out this what he calls the old lie, saying the lie being that there can be no greater glory than being sacrificed for your country. So he instead writes about the horror and inhumanity of warfare. Looking down, continuing down to page 69, as we look at the actual music piece, War Requiem. Here's one of those terms that I want you to notice. This is kind of tricky. We talk about monophony, which is when everybody just sings on the same note. Then there's polyphony, which is where people are singing at different notes. This one, they're not really in unison because they're singing different pitches, but the rhythms are identical, so they call that homorhythmic. That is a feature of War Requiem. Down here we have some of the translation of the words from War Requiem. If I drop down to page 70, there's a symbolic dropping out of voices as the song finishes. And it ends up even dropping out the ensemble, the musicians behind the singers, so that the singers are singing without any accompaniment by the end in yet another term that's called a cappella. So then I'm going to play a little bit of War Requiem so you can hear that as well. This is Benjamin Britten. Here's those two voices that you first hear, the tenor and the baritone. And then in the background, you can hear that boys' choir. This particular movement, you shouldn't be surprised to hear it's called Let Us Sleep Now. Libera me, free me, let me sleep, let us sleep in paradise. So in the background, the boys' chorus is singing in Latin. You can hear the full chorustra, or full orchestra has been added. This is the crescendo. You can hear it getting louder. You can kind of hear in the background, this third piece coming in is an adult chorus. So now we've got the tenor and the baritone, the boys' choir, and an adult choir. Pretty soon we're going to add in the soprano soloist. Now you can hear her. Continued crescendo, which means getting louder. Continuing to crescendo. Pretty soon we're going to get to the dynamic level peak, which is the sound level or the amplitude, if you guys remember from section 1. There it is. That's that peak. Now we're getting quieter. There's the bells playing a tritone. And you can hear the boys singing on that same note. There's that bell playing a tritone again. And we have the boys' choir singing. Now we're here at 4:09. There's that tritone again. Notice there's no orchestra in the back anymore. This is that a cappella part. Another tritone in the bells. These are dynamic markings. This one is pianissimo. Pianissimo. This is as quiet as you can get.